Today is a very exciting day here on Earthship Farms. I'm going to finally begin to implement incorporates mushroom growing and woodland management. Basically, what my vision is to go through the property about a quarter acre, half acre at a time, and thin out the trees, selecting for a good not only timber but also for medicinal trees and edible trees and trees for wildlife. So I'll be leaving some persimmons, some black cherries, but also for timber I'll be leaving the straight hickories and some big oaks, which also provide acorns for wildlife. But basically I'm going to go through this section, which is up here at the front of the property. This will be the first section that I actually get to implement this on. There's a lot of stuff up here that needs to be thinned in this stand. So and my vision for the rest of the property is to kind of go through, and after I thin out the trees, then to plant new trees like fruit trees and nut trees, and to introduce bamboo in different parts of the property. But this first section here is actually going to be the parking lot. I'd like to have a place for people to come visit the farm, and that they can park their vehicles here instead of driving on our what's going to be our private driveway. So this whole section up here at the front of the property, I'm going to go through and mark the trees with spray with this marking paint here, the ones that we need thinned out. And then I've actually found somebody that real reasonably priced and is willing to come through here and cut these trees down. And what we're going to do, instead of cutting the trees down and burning them, or cutting them down and making mulch pits out of them as I have been in the past, this time the logs that are 2 or 3 inches in diameter and bigger, I'm going to cut them into manageable sections and stack them, and then everything smaller than that I'm going to chip it up in a wood chipper to make piles of wood chips. And then come springtime, when it warms up, I'm going to inoculate all the stumps, all the wood chips, and all the logs with different species of mushrooms, and those will end up providing food and medicine, and break down the wood and return the nutrients into the soil. Winter time is really the ideal time to do any woodlot management. First of all, because all the underbrush is dead and you can actually walk through it. And second of all, it's a little easier to get an idea of which trees to keep when there's no leaves on them. You can kind of see the wood a little bit better and stuff like that. So here's a good example of a tree that we're going to get rid of. This is a dead tree. It's already got turkey tails growing on it, which are a medicinal species, but I don't intend to cultivate them because they already grow wild in huge numbers. So we're just going to put a mark on this tree here. Making sure to put a blaze on both sides of the tree there, so no matter which side my lumberjack comes through, he can see that tree needs to be taken out. Next here we have a persimmon tree that's leaning. It's not, I mean, I like persimmons, but this one's not it's not growing very straight, and so we're gonna get rid of that too. Here's an oak tree. I'm probably gonna get rid of most of the oaks in this area. We've got plenty of oaks. I'm going to leave this large oak here, get rid of this one, because I want this whole area to be pretty well clear enough for people to come in here and park in here. Well, the price I got from the tree guy was a little bit shocking. It was a little higher than I expected it would be. He said it runs around $50 an hour for arbor work. So I decided instead to buy a new cordless reciprocating saw, and I'll slap one of these bad boy pruning blades on here. The advantage of this is, as opposed to a chainsaw, is when you're cutting these, because I want this to be a driveway, I'm gonna have to cut everything down flush to the ground, and so getting the chainsaw down there in the dirt every time, you run through blades real quick. So this reciprocating saw here, I can get down in the dirt, even under the dirt, just fine. And when the blade dulls, it's just swap it out and good to go. So these blades like this can easily cut a 6-inch diameter tree. So I'll be able to do most of it with this, and then we'll bust the chainsaw out for the big stuff. It took about an hour yesterday, maybe a little bit longer, to exhaust both of the rechargeable batteries that I have for the Sawzall. But it made quite a bit of headway in that 1 hour. I used up probably one blade as well. So it's not the most efficient way of clear cutting, but like I said, it makes it way more efficient when you're trying to trim down all these little trees all the way flush to the ground, because doing that with your chainsaw, you'd end up running through quite a few blades. I went through here. Everything is completely flush except for some of these bigger stumps. And that's probably only about 4 inches in diameter. And that's, I think, I said originally that it could probably handle 6 inches, and it probably could. But these cuts took quite a bit of battery power. But I was actually able to go through and trim off a lot of the little stubs that were left from the first time I came through here last year. So everything's real nice and flush. There won't be any toe kicking anymore. The only ones that aren't really flush are some of these old ones here that are so there. It's been sitting there for a year or two, drying and seasoning. So now that's seasoned wood, and it's really hard to cut. So there are a couple of these stumps that are going to remain, unfortunately, at least until I decide to, if I want to, cut them out of there with the chainsaw or something. But I think I made quite a bit of progress. I'm separating all the different types of wood for growing mushrooms on. All the stuff that's already dead and decomposing, I'm either going to burn or use to put rings around these mulch pits that I've got. Anything that's you know, this size and up, good little I don't know, not quite logs, but good hefty pieces of wood there. Those are all going to be used for making mushroom rafts, which will just be basically digging a little spot in the ground, putting those in it, covering it with wood chips, inoculating it. Here's another little brush pile. The dead wood's all going to be burned. The stuff that was green when I cut it down, all the small branches that are either too difficult to work with for making rafts, or just too small to even mess with. Those are all, I'm going to rent a wood chipper and chip these ones up. So the main reason for separating the dead wood from the live wood is that any of this stuff that's been dead for a year or two, you know, it's already got other wild mushrooms growing in it. So if I were to throw that in the chipper with the live wood, I would just contaminate the whole batch really easily. So that's why I'm keeping the green stuff separate from the dead stuff. 2 fully charged batteries made quite a big difference. I'd say, let me check here. Lasted about 2 or 3 hours at least this time. Was able to clear up quite a bit today. Got a bunch of goose plums, which are real sticky and thorny and stuff, and they're hard to mess with. So I'm not putting them in the brush piles to chip down because I don't want to mess with them again. They get tangled up too easily, so we're just burning them. That's starting to take shape. I feel like I've been making some good progress. Just been coming out here about every day almost, putting in an hour or two of work, and it's starting to look defined. I've pretty much just gone around the edge here, gone about 20 foot in maybe. Starting to see a little bit more what it's going to look like. I'm using any of the dead wood that I can in these mulch rings around my bamboo here. I'll burn a little bit of it, but I'm going to try not to burn too much of it. Most of what I'm burning is this goose plum wood, and it's just got like thorns all over it, and it's real hard and unmanageable to try to run it through the chipper and everything. I don't want to mess with it, so I'm just going to burn it. But one bad thing that I forgot about, there's a patch of poison ivy in here, and I got in it, and I was ripping up trees by the roots and pulling them up, and I thought they were trees, but the poison ivy that was growing right here kind of comes up like a tree, and it didn't even have any tendrils on it. You couldn't really even tell until you look at the base of it, and then you could see just littlest bit of tendrils. But now up here at the front, there's a little section of poison ivy over there around where my truck is, and there was a section here in this corner. And I got into it heavy last night. I made this big old pile of poison ivy here, and I cut through a bunch of it and got it all over my sawzall, everything. But this is actually the first time that I religiously wiped down all my tools. I threw away the jacket I was wearing, I threw away the pants I was wearing, and then scrubbed down with Tech-New, and actually prevented it, because I'm really sensitive to poison ivy, and I've already got it 2 or 3 times since I started this little project. But I think I'm going to start being a little bit more religious about using that Tech-New stuff to get it off my skin, because I just hate it, and I get it every year when I'm doing this. But anyways, kind of did a little bit with the chainsaw, and the rest I've still been doing with the sawzall to get everything cut down real low. And I'm just going to keep rocking through here and making my piles. And I think I'm on target to be completed by the springtime, which is what I'd like to do. Once it becomes spring, I'd like to be planting things instead of cutting things down. The permaculture concept of finding a way to solve a problem by turning it into a solution or using it for something creative, it's great. It's a great concept, and I always try to adhere to it. But there's times when it's hard to find a constructive way to fit a nasty element into the puzzle here on the farm. For instance, the poison ivy is one of them. I haven't thought of one constructive thing that you could do with that stuff. Goats love to eat it. Maybe there's something there. And another one that we got here in these woods is greenbrier. This is the leaves are edible when they're green and young, and they're actually quite tasty and nutritious. But I mean, this literally is like a bush of thorns, and I'm yanking it out of this tree. I mean, they can go 60 foot high, and it's just the thorniest, nastiest crap. You cut it down, it grows right back, and I don't know. There's got to be a creative use for that too. The goats will eat the leaves, but they won't eat the vines, so it's not a way that you can pin them up on there and get rid of it. All I've been doing is just yanking them down out of these trees and piling them up and burning them. Sometimes I'm actually burning right on top of where I yanked them, right on top of where the roots are growing, so that it'll actually eradicate it, hopefully. That's what I'm going to do here. This is all where this stuff was sprouting up. It's kind of a small area, so I'm going to do a small little bonfire here with some of the dead wood that I'm using for firewood, and hopefully that'll burn up the brambles, because like there's no good way to dispose of these except for burning them, and there's no good way to stop them from growing except for burning the soil. I'm not going to use pesticides or herbicides out here on the farm, so just thought I'd do a little tidbit here, because these thorny brambles here in Oklahoma, and there's probably the 3 things that these forests are cursed with as far as plant wise, is poison ivy, which grows along the margins and also inside the forest. Sometimes it's a vine, sometimes it's a tree. I've seen poison ivy stands that are growing like trees that are like 8 to 10 foot tall. So that's one curse. Another curse is these damn greenbrier brambles. And another real bad bramble that we have, at least in these woods, is wild rose. Wild rose is beautiful, but it's not very comfortable to walk through it when you're bare skinned like I am all summer. But you know, there's places for that. The wild roses, they're beautiful. You know, most of the summer they have flowers on them and they smell great, and they're good for bee pollen and stuff like that. So I'll leave them in certain wilderness areas on the property, but I'd like to be able to walk through these woods almost like a park, and that's kind of what I'm going for. So the brambles don't really have a place inside the property. Now maybe on the edges of the property as a, you know, wildlife habitat and slightly a defensive structure, almost like a hedge. The brambles, poison ivy, stuff like that, that's fine. If it's all on the outside of the property, or the outside edge perimeter of the property, I'd be just fine with that. But other than that, I'm going to have to really fight to confine it to those areas, because these things are unstoppable. It's about 7 days until the official last frost date, so things are going into high gear around here, or at least I'm trying to put them in high gear and try to finish up the trimming this woodlot here. As you can see, the wild garlic and other bulbs are coming up right now. Here's wild garlic here, but the daffodils are blooming right now, and the bulbs are starting to shoot up, so It is, it's springtime. Spring's here, so I'd like to get these trees wood chipped and inoculated as soon as possible. It's early May now. Would have liked to have got this done a little bit earlier, but just the way things worked out. The wood's only been down for a couple months now, so got the wood chipper here today, and we're gonna chip it all up. Try to aim the chips all into one pile so that we can rake them up and use them. Alright, that was a full day's work. I think we got at least about 1,000 pounds of wood chips. So next step will be to inoculate them.